This is Peggy from Roar. So our guest today is Saroop Bharwani, who's the founder and CEO of Senso.ai. So thank you so much, Saroop, for being with us today. And before we jump into the question on the new normal, I'd love to have you tell us more about Senso and what you're doing.
Absolutely, and thank you so much for having me, Peggy. I miss being at all these social events, so this feels really good and good to see you. So happy to tell you. Start by telling you a little bit more about Senso. So in its simplest form, we help banks retain more customers, their existing customers, and you hear a lot about customer engagement. You hear a lot about digital experiences and serving customers in banking through more advice-based experiences. And essentially, a lot of that has to do with data and understanding your customers to a level of depth in terms of know what to provide them and when to provide them those great experiences that I feel is lacking in financial services from a consumer perspective. I'm actually switching my mortgage right now to another bank. And that's just because my existing bank wasn't proactive in providing me an experience when I need it. And naturally, referrals happen, and I got to a stage with this other bank where they provided me something better. And then my existing bank contacted me when it was too late. And I said, where were you like 3 months ago when I was thinking about this? If you had proactively provided me that, I wouldn't even thought about going somewhere else. And I have these conversations with people on a day-to-day basis saying to me, I wish my bank used Senso, because I called in the other day and they didn't give me what I want. I was clear, or they made me wait 72 hours. So how do you transform a delayed experience into an instant experience that's really timely is what Senso strives to do every single day through data and through user experience.
Thank you. And I mean, from a bank perspective, it's way less costly to retain a client than to acquire one. So it just makes so much sense anyway. So looking forward to hearing a bit more in the following questions about how things have been going for you with COVID. So from your perspective, what will be some of the major lasting impacts on the financial services industry following or right now in the middle of COVID yet?
Yeah, so happy to answer that. It's actually a really exciting time in financial services. The state of the economy and what you hear on the news every day, I feel is not as indicative as what's happening day to day in these institutions and the decisions that they're making on a day-to-day basis in terms of where to allocate their budget. And I watched a couple of your other interviews with one of my favorites, Sue, who mentioned this as well, Sue Britton, that a lot of the emphasis on digital experiences and accelerating the adoption of the cloud. Every day I'm having conversations with customers in Canada and in the US on the investment going to be more agile in the use of data and being able to serve up better experiences to consumers, their existing consumers, as well as new consumers, in order to stay competitive in the market. And I feel that investment is not going to stop, because we all see that the big tech companies are accelerating, especially in payments too. I mean, the acceleration of the digital front is obvious. I don't need to say that to you, because that's what every one of your past interviewees have said as well. But that investment is happening. And we hear a lot about cost cutting at banks, and there is cost cutting, but in this particular case, I see an acceleration in investment.
Yeah, definitely. And so if I look at this acceleration and the link with new regulation, new policies, obviously we speak a lot about open banking. You mentioned past interview, that's a topic that's a hot button for Canadian entrepreneurs. What's your perspective on new policies, new regulations that we might see or should see following COVID?
What's top of mind from our customer standpoint and the broad industry standpoint, and I think a lot of consumers as well, and this doesn't only come in financial services, is data privacy, consumer protection. That is the biggest thing that I think is happening. And we're a marketing solution, so marketers are thinking about this all the time. How do we ensure that we don't end up like, Facebook, where we have to answer a lot of these questions? And it's the emphasis of being responsible with data and artificial intelligence. I mean, it's a need in order to serve your customers better, but you got to be responsible in the way you use it. You can't be manipulative. And I talk to my customers every day. You got to have that as a part of your strategy in your brand. And if you don't take steps in order to actually embed that in your brand from day one, as you adopt these technologies, as you adopt Senso and other technologies and the cloud, you're just going to fall into these traps that a lot of these other organizations have when it comes to manipulating their customers. And that's not what Senso's about. That's not what any bank should be about. But this transition is a difficult one in terms of balancing out profitability, especially in banking, with providing the best user experience and really being transparent with customers and providing them the advice they need, even if it means that you're not going to get that instant gratification, that you will get that gratification over time, but it means a consumer for life. That is the transition in the mindset in financial services that's happening. And I think it's an important transitioning that's happening, and consumers are really driving it. Because from a consumer perspective, I want control of my data. I want the option of saying, you know what, I'm willing to subscribe for this experience in exchange for data that I provide you down to the field level. And I can opt out of that down to the field level, right? I think the world is going in that direction, but it's still going to be a quite a big transition. You mentioned open banking, and that's really having a lot of that as well.
Yeah, and it's interesting what you mentioned with instant gratification, and you're back to this short-term thinking, long-term thinking. And it's a rhetorical question, but how do you balance that when you're a public company that has to disclose their results every quarter, and that the people in the organizations have their own personal agenda, which is keeping their job and maximizing their bonus? So it's a very, very complicated challenge. Seems simple on paper, but it's actually difficult to implement. Very difficult to implement.
100%.
From a more global perspective, we see obviously governments taking a lot of debt. We see more inequality between rich and poor, whether between countries, whether within countries. What do you see in terms of stability, global financial order that is probably unfolding already now? But what do you see coming up post the crisis?
Yeah, so there's a spectrum of thinking in this space. And on one extreme, a completely new world order. I'm a big fan of Ray Dalio, but he is an extremist in the sense that, it's the end of, the US and the rise of China. And China's actually doing quite well in this recovery process. But that's one extreme. And the other extreme is it's just a matter of time before, things get back to normal. There will be hiccups along the way. There will need to be debt restructuring, but the stride of the economy will get back to normal at some point. I'm not on. I got to say, I'm not an economist, Peggy, but and for me, I think there is going to be challenging times ahead from a consumer perspective. I look at the data, and I think there is going to need to be workarounds and debt restructuring. We're in sort of a bit of a la land right now, where a lot of forgiveness has happened, but that's only short term. I think Canadians are more responsible when it comes to managing debt than in the US. The divide is not as great, but it's ever so more important for consumers to understand that, yes, interest rates are low, but be responsible in terms of the amount of debt you can take on, because over the next 3 years we may have low interest rates. But I think seeing ahead and understanding the state of your future self and having to pay back an increased amount of debt could put that future self in a bad position. So I think it's just a matter of personal responsibility in this area. It's easy to take on low interest rates and higher amounts of debt, but I think consumers need to be concerned about that. Am I worried about a global sort of like completely 1929 restructuring of the way that we look at money, the end of the fiat system and the beginning of digital currency? I'm not on the extreme side, Peggy. I'm sort of more so, I think we'll come back out, but a lot of changes will be made. Like the adoption of digital currency will happen. I'm a believer in that, but I just don't believe it's going to be a one or the other. I think it's going to be more of a transition.
I agree. I think the truth is in the middle. I'm also a big fan of Dalio. I do think he has good points. China, to your point, did very well. It's back to the data privacy comment you made before. It's a different situation when you're trying to manage large democracy, speaking about the US, where people feel that their own well-being goes above the well-being of the organization of a democracy, while you see exactly the other way around in China. So
Yep.
it's two views of the world that are absolutely opposite. That it's going to be interesting to see, as we always sit in the middle in Canada, which I think is always interesting. In terms of competitive positioning, obviously, when you have this big dislocation like we have right now, it's the perfect time for challengers to, hopefully take over incumbents, and maybe the right time for incumbents as well to rethink what they've been doing. What do you see in terms of financial organization coming as a winner, of a type of organization maybe that will be successful?
Yeah, no, great question. If I look at all the cloud providers, Google, IBM, Amazon, and I have conversations with people in these organizations every day, financial services is the big push right now. And they're coming up with all sorts of creative ways to ensure that they are the cloud provider of choice for the incumbents. And as you know, that transition is a long and expensive one. But Google, for example, launched a service last week called Doc AI specifically for the mortgage industry, where you could just scan a document right now and the data will stream right into the cloud versus having to fill out long forms. Those strategic like entry points or smaller features actually are a hook that gets these mortgage lenders and banks excited about going on the cloud. And they're investing, as I mentioned before, they're investing a lot of money in terms of going on the cloud. And of course, digital adoption and low interest rates has a lot to do with that. So that's another thing. I see big tech making a big push into financial services. It's not only the cloud providers. They're talking about Google again. They're offering services like mortgage calculators on their website, digital banking services, enabling banks like BMO Harris to actually adopt a digital banking platform via the Google Cloud. Now, the idea of retargeting consumers on the Google platform, whether it's retargeting or targeting via interest rates versus an ad, is a thing, right? And I see this push from big tech players into financial services only accelerating over time from multiple angles. Even Google Analytics is changing in a lot of ways to be able to be more industry friendly. So I see that as an opportunity for the incumbents, but also a threat to the incumbents.
Exactly.
In where before they were hesitant in adopting the cloud, now if they don't, they're going to be left behind, either by the big tech players or by their counterparts who are investing in this technology.
Yeah, big tech is interesting. I think we regulators, clients have waited a bit too long to wake up about the threat it has from a societal perspective, but also on the financial service side. Looking at that, sitting in Canada, I'm like, do I really want to have more of my financial service being managed out of the US by Google, Amazon, that's not regulated, versus RBC or TDE, and to your point, if it's providing cloud services, back office, it's one thing. But when you're starting chipping away, because you get all the data, chipping away at the consumer base, I think that's getting dangerous from a national security perspective. So
100%.
Maybe I'm putting my Debbie Downer cap on that, or Peggy Downer, maybe, I don't know, but I think it's a bit scary. But anyway, hopefully that's going to be addressed very soon. At least the US regulator seems to wake up finally, so that's good.
Yeah.
In terms of transformation, so you spoke already quite a bit about financial institutions and what they're doing from a cloud perspective, partnering with players like that, like you, obviously. Any other insights in terms of their digital transformation and their mind on transformation?
Yeah, and I think that going back to adoption of the cloud and migration to the cloud at an accelerated pace. I think there's a lot of money and a lot of attention going there right now. And I think they all realize on a day-to-day basis, I have these conversations that the cloud, in terms of efficiency ratio, which is a big metric for a bank, the cloud will actually produce more efficiency in many, many ways. Right. What we do is essentially accelerate in partially for a very specific use case is accelerate the adoption of the cloud for these financial institutions. We house multiple data sets on the cloud anonymously, and we produce insights. We have a workflow manager. So call us an intermediary or a cloud as a service. We're enabling use cases, and they're investing in us because we're able to do it faster while they migrate to the cloud as sort of sort of their primary getting out of the legacy environment sort of situation, right? But that's still going to take a while. Again, more investment is going in there, and it is really for serving your customers better, right? It's serving consumers better. It's being able to. What happens with these legacy systems is the aggregation of data internally. By the time teams actually get that data, they're actually making decisions about Peggy, what you wanted 3 months ago or 2 months ago or a month ago, depending on how sophisticated or not sophisticated they are. By the time you get that offer, it's outdated and irrelevant. So how do you catch up and be more like a technology company where you're looking at that data almost daily and making decisions on your CAC LTV and optimizing those metrics, alleviating capacity off your branch and call center via low touch, low cost digital touch points. And by optimizing that and leveraging digital to optimize that, it actually will reduce your operational costs and be able to actually increase profitability and share some of that with the consumer in terms of rate reductions and things like that. That's the world that I see, and that's the world I'm excited about.
Yeah, and to your point, really having the client first. I think that was the opportunity of this crisis. I keep hearing financial services or banks saying, oh my God, we are technology companies selling financial products. I'm like, no, technology is just because we're in 2020, like you didn't say you were an email company or a fax company, 20 years ago. So it's great to start with the client, and that's really what your company is helping and offering, which is what people need at these times of uncertainty. On top of that, so that's fantastic. Last question, which is a bit lighter. So during this last 6 months, that seems to have lasted 6 years, what new things did you learn? What have you changed in your life? You were telling me you're cooking way more. Anything you want to share with the viewers?
Yeah, I think it's important for everyone to have an outlet, especially when every day seems the same and we're all sitting in front of our desks without these social settings. So cooking is one thing that I have done more of, and it's my creative outlet, and provides my wife, myself, and my daughter something to eat on a daily basis. So it's a win-win all around. But yeah, that's my creative outlet. I encourage my team to do the same. Find your creative outlet to get away from your screen, get away from your desk, even if it's for a couple of days. Do that. The biggest thing that for me and my family during COVID is I was telling you before, my wife's a nurse at Toronto Western Hospital, and at the beginning of the pandemic, my daughter and I were actually staying with my in-laws for about 3 months, just so we wouldn't expose my daughter while my wife was at the hospital. And it was a very difficult time for us. I would send meals to her hospital floor for her unit. And when the first time I did that, she posted it on Instagram, and so my friends started to do the same thing, and it sort of just spun out into an initiative called Senso.ai, where we spun out a website and allowed anyone to donate money for frontline workers. And the way it worked is you sponsor a meal provided by a business, a local business, let's say it's a box of pizza or something like that, and they would deliver it to the hospital. So we ended up raising $60,000 and helped small businesses and nurses at the same time. And it was a feel-good story that my team really, really loved to be a part of. We're actually writing an end-of-year blog post kind of highlighting that. And that's just like, it just told me that giving back during these times and doing your part is just so important. And that was one of the greatest success stories I think I've had in so long, especially this year. And that was really exciting for us, both as a family, but as a team as well.
That's wonderful. So Senso Go, I'll definitely go after this interview. And thank you for putting together that initiative. That's these steps that make such a difference in people's life. And I'm sure your wife realized that because she's one of these people who is, on in the front. But thank you so much. That's wonderful. And thank you
Absolutely.
for taking the time today. That was great to have your perspective and to have you with us today. Thank you so much, Saroop.
Thank you so much for having me, Peggy. Really appreciate it. Good to see you.
Thank you. Good to see you as well. Take care.
Take care.